Check one. Check one. Check two.
Hello. Good morning, everybody, especially to the panelists, the audience, and then two ladies here. I just thought we will start the proceedings just now. Before inviting the panelists to come on stage, uh, I just wanted to share some thoughts with you before welcoming them. The idea behind this entire activity is like a safari. We always have a Commonwealth Law Conference happening every 2 years. And for the first year, this year in March, beginning of March, at the end of the conference, we had a cricket match. It was between Commonwealth and the Goa team. The cricket match was like a safari. In the midst of a serious conference that was going on, we had a small safari of bunch of cricket enthusiasts among the delegates coming together and joining and playing a match. Today, it's the reverse of that. We are having a cricket tournament, and in the midst of the cricket tournament, we are going to have a small safari, which is a food for thought in terms of, although we are playing cricket, although there are set of rules that are there while playing cricket, we also come across number of ills. How do we get across, get over it? What will be the rules regime? How do we regulate it? And how do we deal with the dispute that might come? So when we are playing cricket, we also have to be conscious of what is happening around. And that's the purpose with which we thought we will have this small sports law seminar today. And we are fortunate to have the cricket legend from Sri Lanka, the 1996 champion, World Cup champion, Mr. Arvinda De Silva, with us. May all join me in and we also have in the panel Mr. Mudassar Hussain from Bangladesh to moderate the session. We have a Sri Lankan senior lawyer, Kuwera De Zoisa, who also is fairly well known in sports law. And from India, we have Mr. Aruneshwar Gupta, a senior lawyer practicing at the Supreme Court of India. And we have a surprise package, a bonus, I should say, in terms of Christopher. It so happened the other day met him on the ground, and they recognized that he was there with us during the time when we played the Lawyers Cricket World Cup in Brisbane. He played for the Australia B at that time. It was a chance meeting him, and thereby we invited him to come and speak a few words because he is himself a sports lawyer based in Brisbane. So I would say we are fortunate to have him, and the people who see this live will be surprised how come in the South Asian Lawyers Cricket Tournament an Australian is there to speak about something with dealing with corruption in sports. I invite you all to come on stage. Please join us. Please, please, please. every time at the Commonwealth Law Conference, we espouse the cause of a rules-based society, a rules-based regime. We are extending that a bit and trying to speak in terms of rules-based, regulation-based regime in sports also. And that's the reason why we thought we will meet. And I invite Mr. Mudassar Hussain to come on stage to take over his role as our moderator and conduct the seminar. And each of the speakers will speak for about 15 minutes, followed by question answers. Thank you. Mudassar, the stage is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us in this early hours of the day. Today we are here to have a discussion, as Mr. Santan has said, a short safari on sports law issues. The topic that we're going to deal today is law in sports governance and its place in the modern times. We are lucky and fortunate to have with us today three eminent panelists from three different jurisdictions to share their experience that they have had in their parts of the world in respect of different sports issues. First, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Kuvera De Zoysa from Sri Lanka, President Council. He has excelled as a lawyer for more than 30 years. He's an expert in the area of civil and commercial litigation, and he is a director and a chairman of various listed and unlisted companies as well. More importantly, he's also had the experience of being a lead counsel to be retained by the SLC on many cricket-related matters. Secondly, we have amongst us a senior advocate from the Supreme Court of India, Mr. Aruneshwar Gupta. Mr. Gupta was the chief architect of the Sports Act enacted by the state of Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh, which finally led to IPL in cricket. He was also the chief draftsman of the white paper on publishing and printing of judgments using neutral citations and a member of Supreme Court Committee on subject categorization. And finally, we have a final speaker from Australia is Mr. Christopher Johnston. Mr. Johnston has experience in sports law and has advised athletes and Australian Sports Anti-Doping Agency in respect of anti-doping matters and has appeared for Australian Sports Anti-Doping Agency in the Court of Arbitration for Sports. He has also assisted Australian athletes in appeals against selection for Commonwealth Games and Olympic teams and has appeared in various tribunals in respect of disciplinary matters. And to top all of that, we have a cherry on top. We have amongst ourselves a very distinguished, a legendary cricketer, Mr. Aravinda De Silva, the World Cup winning member in 1996. And we are very lucky and fortunate to have him amongst us. We would like to begin this session with Mr. Silva having some introductory remark about his experience as a former Test cricketer, as a former world champion, and also his experience in running various organizations in sports and the issues that may crop up, which inevitably we, the lawyers, have to come and address. So I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Aravinda De Silva to give his initial remarks. Thank you.
Morning to you all, members of the head table and friends from all around Asia. First of all, let me tell you how I ended up here. I went for this event the other day, and then I invited a couple of them home yesterday. And I was told that there was this event which is happening this morning, whether I would come and give the open remarks at this event. So I guess I was not really prepared to give a speech as such, but I thought let me come and see what's happening and talk about my experiences and what I thought how the legal system should work towards reacting to the modern day of sport. I remember on my tour of New Zealand in 1991, if I'm not mistaken, there was the first, I think it was the first lawyers cricket tournament, and we had a team from Sri Lanka as well who came and watched our test match at Wellington, and it was a lucky day for me. I ended up getting a double hundred on that particular day. So ever since that day, I remember some of these lawyers came and wanted me to come and attend. Very, very supportive and helpful as and whenever they required any sort of support. But nevertheless, on today's event, I think for you lawyers, I think with ChatGPT coming into effect, maybe it's good time for you to take up another sport or another profession. So maybe all of you all can focus on cricket. But you talk about ChatGPT 60s against some of the latter known countries like Malaysia, and they had a couple of unofficial tours to India which took place, and I remember it was not a professional game, but we started in 1983. That's when I joined the team, and the game gradually transformed from that time to now, which has become a much more commercially viable sport in Sri Lanka. So looking at sport as a commercial venture, I think it is very, very important for the legal system also to be aligned with it. Because when you really look at it, you're playing around with people's careers. When someone gets picked to play for the country, unlike those days, it becomes their career and they have made such a lot of sacrifices to get there. Hence, you need to make sure the groundwork is done in the legal system as well as on the administrative side is in place. So, what I have identified on some of the changes are, if you really dig deep, you will see how cricket has been made a commercial sport. So if you look at television rights, is one area which you really need to focus on, and how transparent it should be. And players' rights to be protected, because they are an important and integral part of the sport. Then comes the association who supports them, and also to make sure that the selection process of these members to the association is streamlined and looked into. How you should get the proper kind of people involved in these associations. And lastly, the commercial aspect of tournaments. Because at the end of the day, I think the most important aspect is to make sure that you have the right people in the right spots. Who are running the sport has to be qualified people to hold those officers in those respective associations. I think that is very important for the simple fact that you need to understand, as I said before, they're playing around with careers. and I have been part of that. So we have to make sure every aspect is covered like in a listed corporate, a financial institution, to be more precise, because when you look at a financial institution, the central bank monitors it on a constant basis and makes sure that irregularities doesn't happen, and they also look at taking precautions on future situations which they might end up facing. So for that, like working on a constitution of a country, you need to keep working at it, because things keep changing. With social media coming into effect, there could be a lot of impact on players per se. So you need to be able to control those things through regulation. And also bringing in too stiff regulation is not the ideal thing. So that is why I feel there should be constant watching and understanding where you need regulation to be brought in, and not to strive progress, but also to make sure they're streamlined. So I was just given a paper because I came here and I just saw everyone, all the speakers having notes just like preparing for a case. But I just walked in and I was just trying to figure out what am I going to say today. And I was given a piece of paper to say that this new IPL has started with some thing to say that there's an app which had come up and they're trying to raise funds through that to be awarded to the man of the match. So I think it's always good for players to be able to earn more revenue, and I think that shouldn't be something which the regulation should block, because we should try and encourage them to enhance their income. And how do you do it within reason, and how you streamline the processes? I think that is what financial businesses are all about. You take banks keep growing, but you have to work within regulations. But too much regulation becomes an issue for any bank to grow. So I think that should be the approach for you all to look at sport as well, and look at this in a very proactive manner, because things keep changing so fast, and unless sport is given a new look and change happens on a regular basis, it becomes a boring sport. So if you look at cricket, how it has grown, we started by playing test cricket, and then it changed to one-day cricket, which became more popular. And then the commercial aspect of it was dying. People saw there was no time for most people to come to the ground and spend to watch the sport. So they came out with this T20. And even the T20 at some point might become an issue for people to even spend that 3 hours. So they bought in the 100 ball. So things can change. But I think similarly, even the legal system needs to be proactive to look at these changes and work around as to how we make it that much more exciting for all parties. So even on the sport itself, there are so many changes which happened throughout my career. So if you look at the one-day game, we started in Australia. They started a 15-over power play in the 80s, which some of the countries didn't adopt in the subcontinent initially. But as soon as they found someone like Srikanth in the Indian team, we had that same rule applied in India, and there was a lot of advantages for batsmen who were aggressive in the first 15 overs. And we really transformed it and understood the impact of it only after 1996, that we had a real conscious as to working out as to how we are going to take advantage of that 15 over rule. So playing especially in the subcontinent, and we had to look at options of moving some of the batsmen who were batting down the order, up the order, to try and make sure that advantage was taken into our strength, and then build a team across those strategies. So similarly, then the power plays changed again, where now you get another power play down the innings to make it a little bit more interesting and to get rid of the monotonous way of batting from the 15th over all the way up to the 45th, 46th over. So they brought in another power play into the 41st over, where again combinations of teams had to be changed to look at big hitters coming in the middle overs as well. And the batting lineups had to be shifted and changed. So I think that's why I say regulation makes changes for strategy as well. So we need to be very careful in whatever we do. Player protection, and sometimes players are being wrongly, there are allegations against players being expressed in a wrong manner. So you need to be punishing those people as well, the ones who bring in allegations without proper rules or proper things happening. So I think the most important thing is to look at all these aspects and work out and formulate something which will suit the future sport to grow. I think that is the key, and to help the players also to play in an environment which is much more happier, and more so to be able to make a career out of the sport. And I would like to thank you all for inviting me, and wish your association all the very best, and for it to grow from strength to strength. And I would like to see a World Lawyers Tournament coming to Sri Lanka, and hope it will happen soon, and my support will be there at any time if you need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. De Silva, for sharing with us your experience and some insightful thoughts. In particular, what interested me the most was his remark in connection to safeguarding the interest of the players, because a sport is only going to last, a sports industry, if the players' interests are also protected. And not only that, he has also focused on the areas where regulations are required, and a dialogue that must exist between stakeholders, where to discuss the extent of the regulations that would be required, and so that we don't stifle the system. So Thank you once again, sir, for sharing your experiences and such insightful thoughts. At this point of the discussion, I would like to invite Mr. Kuvera Di Zoysa to share his experience in the Sri Lankan jurisdiction. As we all know, there are some fundamental imperatives that is connected with sports. Say, for example, we need a level playing field, and to ensure that the results of the matches are determined by merits and nothing else. So, to that extent, it's an integral part of it is how to prevent corruption in sports. And in my understanding, I think Sri Lanka has taken a massive steps in trying to eradicate corruption in sports by framing a national legislation as well. So it would be very interesting to understand how Sri Lanka wants to go about this whole thing and to share that bit with us. I would like to invite Mr. Zoysa to discuss the Sri Lanka's approach in eradicating corruption in sports and the challenges being faced by Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Very good morning to all of you, and nice to see two ladies also in the audience. And I thank the organizers for inviting me for this August assembly to speak to you all on some thoughts that I think that goes in line with the topic. Now, before I touch on this topic, I think I should also comment on certain remarks, valuable remarks that my friend Aravind made, especially with regard to regulations. Now, with all due respect to Aravinda, Sri Lankan sport is the central command. There is a Minister of Sports in this country. So the regulations are, when you say the Minister of Sports, he's a political figure. The regulations are promulgated in terms of the sports law. We have a sports law which has been enacted in the year 1973 by the Minister of Sports. Now, as of date, because of certain regulations that the minister has introduced, there are many litigation pending in the appellate forums in this country. As quite rightly Aravinda said, the regulations have to be, there is a need for regulations, I do agree. But it can't be excessive, and it should be formulated keeping in line with the principal objectives, as our learned moderator said, in order to safeguard the sport and the players and the officials and whoever who are involved in the game of cricket when it comes to cricket. Now, as you know, Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan Football Federation has been banned by the World Federation as of date. The FIFA has banned Sri Lankan football from taking part in international matches, and there is a ban imposed on the basis that there is political interference in the game. As you know, the Articles of Association of the International Cricket Council, Article 2.5, if I remember right, specifically deals there cannot be political interference. It specifically states, and the national associations, when it comes to cricket, has to be free of political interference. It should be autonomous, independently. It should run, keeping in line with the objectives, principal objectives of the International Cricket Council. I think all of us here, the colleagues who have come here to take part in this tournament are countries who are carrying full member status of the International Cricket Council. So we have subscribed to their articles, and we have taken a pledge that we would be working in line with the principal objectives of the International Cricket Council when it comes to our relevant national sports associations. So yes, on one side we need regulations. It has to be whatever the laws needs to be updated. So suitable people should run these organizations, no doubt. We fully endorse that. And having said that, regulations also need to be, as he quite rightly said, cannot be excessive. Now, there had been many regulations, as I told you, which has ended up in litigation, where I'm also part of that legal team, and I would not speak any more on that since it's a matter that is pending in court. So let the courts decide as to the regulations are, whether it's are necessary, the current regulations in Sri Lanka, which has been introduced when it comes to certain aspects of the administration of cricket in Sri Lanka. Now, having said that, getting on to the Sri Lanka's approach, I thought that I will share some from the Sri Lankan perspective, for you all to know what Sri Lanka has done with the intention of eradicating corruption in sports, with special emphasis on cricket. So you know that there are two types of corruption, can be classified into two types of corruption, that is management corruption and competition corruption. Now, management corruption involves corrupt management decisions by sporting bodies and sports officials, such as awarding of host city status for major sporting events without following a transparent bidding process, negotiation and allocation of rights. Now Aravinda was also talking about media rights and things like that. Then awarding of contracts for construction of sporting venues without following a transparent bidding process. Awarding sponsorship and broadcasting contracts as a kickback. Providing inside information for benefits, financial or otherwise. Now, competition corruption involves activities by players and or those officials who have a direct responsibility for the outcome of a sporting interest, such as match fixing, spot fixing, accepting bribes, providing inside information for benefits, doping, tanking, giving up a match, losing intentionally or not competing, often to rig end of season results for promotion or relegation, rigging the surreptitious substitution of better athletes or animals or teams. So that is how it goes. Now, anti-bribery and corruption policies implemented by the international sports governing bodies. The ICC, you know, all of you all probably are aware that there is ICC has its own anti-corruption code. The primary instrument in ICC's efforts to act against match manipulation as the ICC's anti-corruption code. The ICC code is applicable to players, player support personnel, ICC officials, pitch curators, umpires and similar persons connected to the sport of cricket. The ICC code specifies various forms of match manipulation as offences and imposes penalties in the form of periods of ineligibility which can extend to a lifetime. So this serves as the first level of measures against match manipulation. Now, having acceded and subscribed to this anti-corruption code, as you all know, anti-corruption code, when it comes to the this serves only as a first level measure against match manipulation. It doesn't carry any, it can, if you are found guilty, there can be you can be banned for maybe for several months, or it can carry a lifetime ban. Now, having gone through this, I think Sri Lanka, and also looking at the other international, it carries only a non-criminal punishment. There are no criminal punishment. They don't carry any custodial sentences as such if you are found guilty for any corrupt activity. And as you all know, there is a Convention Against Corruption. Is the only legally binding universal anti-corruption instrument. The far-reaching approach of the convention and the mandatory character of many of its provisions make it unique tool for developing a comprehensive response to global problem. Currently, 189 state parties have signed this convention, and 84 of the Convention Against Corruption on safeguarding sport. Sport also has been recognized in this from corruption, adopted by the conference at its 8th session held in Abu Dhabi from the 16th or 20th December 2019. Is the key international legal document that deals with the corruption in sports. Now also the resolution I have set out here, acknowledging the fundamental role played by states parties with the assistance of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in preventing and combating corruption in sport. Recognizing also the contributions that other intergovernmental organizations and forums make in the fight against corruption in sport, that is also covered. Noting that while the implementation of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption is the responsibility of state parties, the promotion of integrity, transparency and accountability and the prevention of corruption in sport are responsibilities to be shared by all relevant stakeholders. Now, in the year 2023, 45 jurisdictions have criminalized corruption in sports, including Sri Lanka. Furthermore, criminalizing corruption has made the work of law enforcement and criminal justice authorities more effective in the battle against corruption. National sports organizations have codes of conduct that apply to players. I believe in all the countries there are national codes. coaches and officials, which includes rules against corruption and manipulating matches. This can lead to non-criminal punishment by the national sporting organizations if breached. Now, Sri Lanka is the first South Asian country to introduce a law to battle against the corruption in sports. In the year 2019, the Parliament of Sri Lanka enacted the law, that is the Prevention of Offences Relating to Sports Act number 24 of 2019. The said act covers most aspects of corruption, including engaging in betting, gambling, match fixing, providing inside information for benefits, financial or otherwise, action that brings the sport into disrepute. The very objective of the said act is to prevent match fixing, corruption, illegal manipulation and illegal betting in sports, as clearly stated in section 2A of the said act. And also the prevention of, these are some of the salient features of the act that I'm quoting for you all, for your information. Preventing of offences relating to sports act specifically called out and penalized match fixing as an offence. Now it is an offence in Sri Lanka. Section 4.1 of the act has listed out possible instances where match fixing could take place as follows. 1. Engages in betting, gambling or any other activity involving financial or any other advantage to himself or another person, or causes a financial disadvantage or loss to another person, knowing that it would corrupt any sport or sporting event. Acts in a manner that ensures the occurrence of any improper performance, act, omission or an outcome which is the subject of an illegal bet relating to a sport or any sporting event. Now, also provides for financial or any other advantage, reward or benefit, any inside information relating to a sport, any sporting event or any person to any person, including a betting operator, other than in connection with bona fide media interviews and commitments. So provides or receives any gift, payment, reward or benefit, financial or otherwise, that might reasonably be expected to bring such person or any sport or sporting event into disrepute. Now I will also comment on, I think Santa gave a very interesting article when I just came, where there is a app that has been introduced in India that is being discussed. So whether that also can fall into an offense in terms of our law is also a matter that gave food for thought that needs to be looked into. Now, because it says engages in any act or omission that is directly or indirectly related to any of the conduct or specified in the preceding paragraphs and is prejudicial to the interest of any sport or sporting event. So which is a very wide section, which a lot of things can be brought into that. Now section 5 of the act states, any person or any person connected to a sport who solicits or accepts or agrees to accept or offers money or any other reward or benefit. So that's a very wide, once again, controls any other person or thing for such person's own advantage or to the advantage of another, dishonestly or fraudulently, or solicits, entices, persuades, induces or instructs any person directly or indirectly to perform or refrain from performing an act, to influence the result, progress, conduct or any other aspect of any sport or sporting event, commits the offense of corruption in sports. So there's a very wide definition with regard to what corruption in sports is in terms of our law. Now section 6 and 7 deals with illegal manipulation and offense of illegal betting. So any person connected to a sport who influences improperly, unfairly or dishonestly the result, progress, conduct or any other aspect of any sport or sporting event commits the offense of illegal manipulation in sports. So any person or any person connected to a sport who possesses information in connection with any sport or sporting event, knowing such information to be inside information or information on illegal corrupt conduct and bets on that sport or sporting event, encourages another person to bet on that sport or sporting event in a particular way, or communicates with such information to another person who the first person knows or ought reasonably to know would be likely to bet on that sport or sporting event, commits the offense of illegal betting in sports. So the interpretation of the sport includes any form of sport, game, pastime, physical training, body building and exercise, which is recognized by the Secretary as a sport for the purpose of the Sports Law of 25/1973. Now we made also a significant progress where esports was introduced. The Minister of Sports in Sri Lanka officially declared esports as an official sport in the country. Now esports, you know, whatever you do on the internet when it comes to, can be now brought under the interpretation of sport, so which would have wider repercussions in terms of our law. So serious, so that needs to be seriously considered by whoever who is involved in sports, maybe the players, maybe the officials. So that was brought in by way of a regulation. So as Aravinda said, these are regulations which empowers the minister, appropriate instances, and during based on necessity, the minister can promulgate these regulations. Now, any person, the punishments and legal consequences. Now, any person who commits an offense specified in section 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8, that is corruption, betting, etc., shall on conviction be liable to a fine not exceeding rupees 100 million or to imprisonment for a period not exceeding 10 years or to both such fine and imprisonment. So that is our law. It is noteworthy to mention that section 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 of that covers umpires, match adjudicators, match referees, curators, members of venue staff, ground staff, support staff, retired players, and officials of national associations of sports as well. So it has a very wider classification. So the Act criminalizes offenses in a nutshell. The Act criminalizes betting and gambling activities that would corrupt a sport or sporting event, underperforming in a sporting event in exchange for money or other rewards, preparing a playing surface of any sport in any way agreeable to a person, including a betting operator, in exchange for money or other reward, providing access to players in order to influence their performance for money or other benefit, alteration of the course of the result of a sporting tournament, using inside information for betting or disclosing such information knowing that it would likely to be used to bet on a sporting event, illegal manipulation of sporting events. So extraterritorial jurisdiction was also brought into this act where an offence is committed outside Sri Lanka. The High Court of Sri Lanka can take cognizance of that offence. If that activity connected outside the territorial jurisdiction of Sri Lanka falls within the ambit or the definition of corruption and betting in terms of our act, such person could be indicted and tried criminally in the High Court of Sri Lanka, and it carries the penalties as stipulated in that section 30. So there was also, in terms of this act, a special investigation unit was set up consisting of police officers not below the rank of assistant superintendent of police. Now that is within the police department, to investigate and carry out investigations and ensure that the law is enforced. That was done. So that some of the functions and the powers of the special investigation unit I have listed out here. Due to time constraints, I will just run through that. So then these are all where the powers of the investigation unit, where they can inquire, look into your bank accounts, your family members, and it covers a wide gamut of areas. So now the challenges that we face in enforcing this law, there is a doubt or a question arises whether we have that expertise in carrying out these investigations. Now, when it comes to corruption, you know that we have Mr. Alex Marshall, who is the head of the ICC. Sri Lanka generally engages his services, who has been he's a former, I think, a retired Scotland Yard police officer. He is currently the ICC head of anti-corruption unit. So Sri Lanka has sought his expertise in most of the cases. I think we don't have that expertise. So also as Aravinda quite rightly said, in implementing any law, we have to be cautious, because if we try to go about trying to implement, if you look at the content of the law, anything can be brought into under criminal corruption and betting. So because of the interpretations, so far this has not been tried and tested in any court in Sri Lanka, yet to be tried. So we have to be, even the law enforcement authorities, this can basically, when it comes to careers of players, so you have to be cautious. There are, today the social media is very powerful and active in this country, I believe all over the world. So people can say anything, any allegations against players, officials, but the authorities that investigate, I believe, has to be cautious, exercise extreme caution, and if they conduct a proper investigation. Having said that, and if there is evidence, only I think whoever may be a player it can be a official, so anyone should be dealt with. So I think the biggest challenge that we have is we don't have expertise in this area, though we have a law in place, especially when it comes to investigations. So we have always sought the assistance of international agencies to carry out and implement these laws. So having said that, I conclude my whatever. I believe that I was able to share within the given time frame a little, 15 minutes is not, I believe, adequate, but I believe I was able to share some important salient features as to how Sri Lanka has gone about in dealing with corruption, eradicating corruption and dealing with corruption in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much. And I thank once again for inviting me. And it was my pleasure to be here in this August Assembly with all the top-notch at the head table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zoysa, for your detailed analysis of the newly enacted legislation of the passed by the Sri Lankan Parliament. Interestingly, the first thing I had in mind before Mr. Zoysa started his speech was the role that investigation plays in any anti-corruption disciplinary proceedings. So, and I was very delighted to see all the slides that he had on the investigation and how he has appreciated the lack of expertise that exists there. Because I'll just take a minute to share one of my experience in one of the sports match fixing arbitration I was part of in 2014 or early part of 2014. That was in relation to one cricket match fixing proceedings. One of the biggest issue we have had was with the investigation that was carried out by ACSU and the extent of the policing power that they have. And maybe one of the first question I probably would have to you at the time of the question answer session was is going to be how the investigation power that is accorded under the Act is that somehow going to benefit the ACSU or of the Sri Lankan board or whoever they designate them for conducting any investigation into sports related offenses under the code, the disciplinary proceedings. So, and whether they can take advantage of it, because the biggest obstacle or the limitations that they have is the lack of policing power. So whether the newly enacted legislation has any bearing on that aspect or not. And also regarding the other aspect I was very intrigued is I believe in the anti-corruption code of ICC, the match fixing definition is, match fixing is defined in a manner that has an exception in the sense that if you throw a match for some tactical reasons to determine points or to select the opponent you want to face in the next round, that does not, strictly speaking, fall within the definition of match fixing. So is that point also addressed in your newly elected legislations or not? So with that food for thought for you for the subsequent part of the session, I would now like to invite Mr. Anushwer Gupta as a senior advocate from Supreme Court of India. And now we will fly from Sri Lanka to India to look into the structuring of National Sports Association within India. As I stated earlier, Mr. Gupta has been a part of very important committee in drafting legislations for different provinces. So it would be very interesting to see what he has to say on this. Mr. Gupta, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be with the lawyer cricketers. It's amazing. And thanks to my friend Arvind De Silva to be here, who's a cricket legend. We made a short request and he came with us. And I always say, you know, the sports people need little preparation than what the lawyers need. Because all the facts and circumstances for a lawyer are outside the field. He doesn't know. So it has to gather it from the client, so the preparation is huge. For a sports person, it's all, the skill is in the DNA. So it's not difficult for him to start be on as soon as he get an opportunity to project himself and give his expressions. So I don't think Mr. De Silva has a disadvantage of having a short notice for being here with us. All the dignitaries on the dais. Now another thing, I was always envious of sports players because they play and we only practice. So that's a very big issue, but I am very happy to be with the team of lawyer cricketers who are both practicing as well as playing. And there's a very interesting facet which I feel about it. Now, the whole sports, the sports, why everybody is so enthusiastic about sports. In fact, if you go back, when the first man threw the first stone to, take up a fruit from a tree or to shoe an animal, that was when the sports was created. So it's the beginning of sports. Everybody is a sports person. There is nobody in the world who is not a sports person. Everybody has played some or other sports in his lifetime. And that is one reason why there's so much of enthusiasm with sports. But sports as a profession has evolved because of passion of the few who wants to excel in that field. I was amazed when we started drafting it. I found out there was something like 8,000 sports in the world. 8,000. And Olympics are only playing about 7 of them. They are continually increasing more and more sports. So there are Summer Olympics and Winter Olympics. And incidentally, cricket is not a part of Olympics. And that is because cricket has its own, they have their own fan following. They have got own people who love to watch cricket, who want to talk cricket, and who wants to, every ball, everything that happens in cricket is discussed. It's like a second religion for most of the people, and particularly those in the South Asia. Now for cricket, for coming to the real topic of a law in the sports governance, there are about 48 stakeholders in our sports industry. Right from the people who are there for purpose of employment, people who are there for the purpose of carrying out business, people who are there for, just to be socially getting on the TVs. So there are politicians and people that are there for public relations. But the real focus is always the sport associations and the players. And therefore the laws are basically there to regulate the conduct of players and the associations, as rightly said by my colleague. Now, law is a very interesting thing. See, law, it doesn't deal with normal situations. All laws which come into existence are to deal with abnormal situations. The entire relationship of whether it is sports or it is human is based on a trust. And whenever there's a breach of a trust, the law has to come into play. So there are two factors of law. One is to show that, look, these are the rules which has to be followed. If you don't follow the rules, then these are the consequences that are going to follow. And then to find out whether the consequences or what are consequences to follow, there is an investigating system to find out whether this person has exactly committed the error or not. The trust is always there. Moment you are out, the batsman knows that he's out. So he walks away to the pavilion. There are n number of situations. But the problem arises when a person is declared out and he feels he's not out. Now that's where the trust is breached. And that is the problem. The third issue is, which is a major factor, is the fan following. And this is what I connect to the rise of the civil society. And that really answers one of the papers which Mr. Santhan has given to us as to if the fans are directly making payments in the account of the player, whether it is a breach of all these rules and regulations which have been framed. And so therefore, let me refer you, tell me something about the international, because this is something which I found and which we were struggling with, the structure of the sport industry. So on the top, there are international federations and world federations. Then we have got the state federations. Then we have got the provincial or the district federations. And then we have got the clubs below them. Now, everybody talks about corruption of national federations and the other National Sports Association. Has anybody thought of corruption in International Sports Federation? And I think there's a major issue. Major issue which, and I'm particularly when I talk from the South Asia region, and I feel this corruption is huge amount in the because they want to have a control. Now, according to me, in a world where we are shifted from the entire issue of control to regulation, having control on other people's profession is itself a corruption. And that's serious. Like my colleague said, 40 associations. In India, football association is banned. How do you ban it? And who are you to ban it? You know, that's a very interesting, and that's something which will have to be looked into. So when we started, you know, it's very interesting. And the second part is like, I had a personal talk with Abhinav Bindra, who got the gold medal in Olympics. And he said, look, when I was having the last final, somebody came and tampered with my rifle. He just came out, he did something, and I was not able to shoot. And when I did it and I was shooting it, my whole base was moving. So somebody removed a screw somewhere, and it was all. Now, how do you deal with these issues? And he lost it. He lost the gold, he got a silver. Now, that is a spur of the moment. In the sports, the major issue is the spur of the moment. So every decision, everything which has to be done fast. If you don't do it fast, the whole sports industry goes for a 6. Because the entire sports industry is basically based on what we call as the wow factor. The more there is a wow, the more the TRP. And now, you know, the whole sports industry virtually picked up after 1980s when the television and all the new technologies have come into play and this money started pouring in. Because ultimately, the sport is an entertainment. It's a live entertainment with a military precision. Now, that's most important. If your focus is lost, you are out. So you can't lose your focus. So in this, therefore, for a player, a genuine player, he is not. You see, for him, he will not enter. And at a soul level, he is a very mature person. So he will not enter corruption. The corruption is only that aberration. So we are dealing with that aberration, but in the process of dealing with the 3% of aberration, you try to kill the 97% of the industry. So somebody will have to look into this, and this is a very serious issue, which I would really, the whole South Asia lawyers are here, and we must exactly look into this. Now, when I drafted the Sports Act, I'll just give you a very interesting facet. Why did it come to me? I had no love. I have a sports passion. Right from beginning of my life, I had all the statistics, and I love statistics. So right from Olympics and cricket, and in our time, we had Nari Contractor and Salim Durrani. In fact, I'm sad to tell you that he expired yesterday. And, you know, and when Salim Durrani and Worrell and all those the big H and the big Ws of West Indies. So I used to, you know, watch it. So when this whole idea came up, and so what to do about the youth energy? So that was an issue which my chief minister raised to me when I was additional advocate general. And then I told her, you know, we can divert them to sports. So, you know, everybody in his lifetime has got about 2, 3, 4 hours extra time. So whether you spend in sports or you spend in dining, wining, or other entertainments, there's a choice that everybody makes, or reading books. So sports is a wonderful place to divert your energies. But the moment I started drafting the act, I went into the sports industry around the world. We went to Australia. So the internet was already there, so we had all the data with us. So whether it was China, Russia, America, England, Australia. And I was amazed to see that the Olympic Association of England, they don't take even a dime from the government. And they don't allow regulations to be there. Now, this is where the real conflicts come in, as my colleague said. You know, Olympics says no interference of the government. But they want to take advantage of the government in every game. At the end of the Olympics, you have a national anthem of the country coming up. So this is a very, very fine contradiction. So far as the large number of European countries, I can understand it, they are not government. But in other countries, like the South Asian countries, everywhere, you know, the government has to get into to stop exploitation and to see that the masses are not being used, or the money doesn't flow in a direction where it should not flow. The end of the day, the money is a very, very serious issue. So when I finished my drafting, it was all out of passion. We ran into 52 drafts. It took me 4 months to study and do all. And incidentally, there was no committee to a single man who was doing it all. So we did it. And the real issue when it came up for BCCI, now that is very interesting. The BCCI had 33 votes. When Lalit Modi came to me and he said, Mr. Gupta, this is a problem. Cricket, we have an issue of BCCI. I said, what is the problem? He said, we have got 33 votes. Now, Dalmia has got 16 votes. We have got 17 votes. But after the votes are cast, he will cast 1 vote as a president of BCCI. And then there's a tie, so he casts another vote as a chairman of the committee. So for last 2 elections, we are losing it. So then I realized this is amazing. And this has been going on and going on. But since Lalit Modi had a passion for, IPL, I'm talking 2005, this is 4 years before the IPL took place. So I asked him, where the money? So he said, I can bring 1 lakh crore for the country. So we did not reach that 20 billion or 15 billion, but we reached a figure of about 3 billion. And that is because there are reasons, and I know a lot of reasons about it. So I said, okay, let's draft an act. So when we started with Rajasthan, the act was already there. The issue was that the district associations, when they had to vote for the sport association, the state level association, there were 33 districts in Rajasthan. So there were 33 votes. But in the society, there were 57 life members. And large number of life members were the president's employee, gardeners and cooks. And so they could never win. So the people who really had to have power, they could never come into the system. Now that's a major issue. So we got over it. Then I did the same thing for Himachal, and then we did for UP. Because I said, if you want 1 vote, you need to work for at least 2 votes. And because, democracy, this is one of the biggest issues in democracy. You have to have number counts and not what is in the talent or the heads. So finally, we got Himachal and Rajasthan, and we got this come into play, and then the whole thing is now history. And but then another interesting part which I want to share with him is, both are very difficult. Making a regulation and implementing a regulation. And now I realized that there are certain amendments which we thought at a real initial stage also, which have to be changed. But since the government changed, and 2 of the acts were withdrawn by the government. So coming to these, there are issues on players. So players, basically, another issue is NADA and WADA, because there's a drugs issue, is a major issue which is coming up. And we did a case in Delhi where the NADA had favored there's a shot putter who had a choice to go to Olympics, who was selected for Olympics. NADA, there was drugs issues against him. NADA said no, he acquitted him. And then WADA came in. So to tell you very frankly and share with you is that there are a large number of international associations which have continue to push the other countries so that they don't have a serious competition. There are competitions. And there's a whole way to kill competition. That, according to me, is the biggest corruption in the sports industry. And therefore, one of the major things which I would move here today is that we must create a South Asia Sports Dispute Resolution Center. So that at least the disputes which are here, and so that is where the lawyers come in, that is where the judges come in, and there where the arbitrators can come in. So there are a lot of things that can be, but it has to be done very effectively, very efficiently, and very quickly. So as I show the match fixing concern, incidentally, I had a chance to meet Arif in the beginning, who was the first cricketer from Pakistan who was involved into it. And then Azharuddin I met, and Srishant I met. And at least Azhar was very clear that there was nothing, because one match when she played, he scored a century. The other, they won the match, and the third was drawn. But these instrumentalities. So one of the major issue is how this power which has been given by these resolutions or regulations are being taken care of as not to affect, and that is what Arvinder said, that that's the career of the player. And career of the player is a very small, it's from 16 to maybe 35, unless we have Tendulkars who have continued to 40. And if you kill a career of a player for 3 to 5 years, it's gone. It doesn't come back. So all these legal sports in the modern times, and the modern times, again, it is not only e-gaming, because we are deeply into supporting a lot of e-gaming. There are virtual games coming up. And in the virtual games, their whole teams are there. So there are a lot of legal issues which are going to come up in the virtual games. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for your observations on how the sports bodies are being run in India. The one thing that I take away from his speech is very interesting remark about why so less is spoken of the corruption in the international governing bodies as opposed to the national associations. That's something one should actually look into. But at least we do look into papers every now and then and see corruption being talked about in relation to FIFA. But not much is spoken about in respect of other sports organizations, including cricket. At this point of time, we have the game of cricket is a great leveler. We have had corruption discussed. We have had governance issue discussed in respect of associations. And now we would be discussing the doping issues. And to discuss those, I would like to invite Mr. Christopher Johnston, who is a member of the National Sports Tribunal in Australia. I would like to invite him to share his experience and his role in the tribunal and enlighten us. Mr. Johnston. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Johnston for you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm conscious of time. We're aiming for 10 o'clock to finish, I think, because we've got a game today? No games. Just drinking. Right. Well, that doesn't. I'll keep going then for till lunchtime. I won't. Remark was made at the beginning. Why have an Australian at a South Asian Lawyers Championship, a South Asian Sports Law Conference? My answer to that is, well, where do you think Australia is? It's not in Europe. It's south of Asia, so I guess we're South Asian, and which is why I blend in Sri Lanka perfectly. And if you come to Brisbane, and I hope you all do, you'll see the Sri Lankan community, the Indian community, and how the boys and girls from those families who have come to live in Australia, how they all play together. They all eat curries. They don't eat Western food. My boys don't, and my daughter certainly doesn't. And this wonderful South Asian community that exists both in Melbourne and Brisbane. I was talking to Aravinda, who regularly goes to Melbourne for family. This is a very important fabric, and it's a great segue into what Mr. Gupta was saying about cricket being the great leveller. PL, we were talking about this at your house. If cricket had not been invented today, it's not a sport that could be played. Do you agree? It doesn't make sense. And I said, well, what is cricket? How do you explain cricket to somebody who doesn't understand it? Because it's a bit like saying, well, what is poetry? Because poetry is the use of complex words to convey a hidden message when direct speech could easily be used. And the reason why I raise that is because in cricket we have a deteriorating leather ball. We have, as Australia found out in India, at least for the first two games, surprising pitches. But Australia can't point the finger at anybody because, look, this beautiful deck that we used to have at the Gabba suddenly became a minefield in the South Africa match. It was all over in 2 days, which is a shame because I had a box for 5. The point being that you have a deteriorating pitch, a deteriorating ball, you play with a bat, it's an individual sport, yet it's a team sport. An individual can win the game, an individual can lose the game, but nobody gets the credit, it's always the team. This doesn't make sense as a sport. Aravinda made a really interesting point about ChatGPT, and we're all, as lawyers, told that this is going to somehow take money from us. But I can't see a computer standing in court arguing complex cases, thinking about cross-examination, thinking about how to present a case, because AI is only reactionary. So how do you test that proposition? As Aravinda challenged us to, you could say, well, can I create a robot against whom I could play cricket? The answer, of course, is not, because how does a robot adjust its shot? How does a robot think about when the player's getting tired? How does a robot think about a field placing? How does a robot look at what the posture is of a particular batsman and decide where he's going to hit the ball next, or what the bowler's going to do with the ball next? So the beauty of cricket is that it reminds us that the human factor in the application of laws and the application of rules and the application of challenges will always remain. And we can talk about AI as much as we like, but in a rules-based society where discretions ultimately have to be exercised by judges, we realise that the art of persuasion and the art of participation are the most important factors. These sorts of tournaments are vital to remind us lawyers of what our roles are in a rules-based society. In Australia, I am both a barrister and a member of the National Sports Tribunal. The National Sports Tribunal was created in 2019 as an experiment by the Australian government, and it's now been approved as a permanent fixture. The National Sports Tribunal has jurisdiction over a number of elements of sport. However, it requires individual sports to give it jurisdiction, and that's not a concept that people should be unfamiliar with. Most administrative tribunals require jurisdiction to be conferred on it by somebody else. As I speak to you today, 95% of... Sorry, I'll go back one step. For a sporting organisation to exist in Australia, it needs to be approved by the Australian Sports Commission, which is a body created under legislation. And it is also the body that controls funding for sport. 95% of the sports recognised by the Australian Sports Commission jurisdiction on the National Sports Tribunal. So at the moment, the National Sports Tribunal can hear anti-doping, bullying, harassment, nomination disputes and appeals, and employment-related disputes within those sports. Importantly, the most powerful sports in Australia, cricket, rugby league, Australian Football League, so AFL, that funny sport that we play in Australia that nobody else plays, 18 aside on a round oval in freezing temperatures where they wear nothing more than a singlet and shorts because it's Victoria and nothing in Victoria makes sense. Being from Queensland, I can say that. Those sports have not yet conferred jurisdiction on the National Sports Tribunal. They maintain their own anti-corruption integrity unit, and they also deal with their own discipline. What they don't deal with is drugs in sport. We, the National Sports Tribunal, is the tribunal that deals with drugs in sport across every single sport in Australia. Now, Mr. Gupta made mention of drugs being an issue which isn't properly regulated within the South Asian cricket community, and it recalls to my mind two interesting case studies about cricket and drugs, and some of you will know where I'm going with this. Australia's arguably greatest bowler, arguably, of course he was, Shane Warne. I said Australia's, I didn't say the world. People forget that Shane Warne was banned for a year for an anti-doping rule violation. He took, the argument was, a diuretic. What's a diuretic? A diuretic is a diet pill. It helps you shed water, therefore it's a weight loss drug, but it is a banned substance because it is a masking agent. So back in the 1970s, professional athletes, mostly in the United States, discovered that the use of anabolic steroids could be masked by taking a diuretic to help you clear the metabolites. He said his mum gave it to him. Shane Warne wasn't the smartest guy. He was, I met him once and had a conversation with him. I withdraw that. He was not the most educated guy, but he was quick and he could read a cricket field, I think, almost as well as Ricky Ponting. And Ricky Ponting, I think, is the person who could analyse the cricket field as well as anybody in the world. Aravinda, thoughts? Maybe? He was pretty good. And Ricky still does it. So, did Warnie know that what he was taking was a banned substance? Question. I can't answer that. I didn't ask him. Who else? Who else was banned for taking a banned substance? Which bowler? The Rawalpindi Express, huh? Shoaib Akhtar. Now, he was banned for taking, there were two of them, Muhammad Amir as well, I think. Is that correct? Yeah. He was banned in 2006 by the Pakistan Cricket Board for taking an anabolic agent. What did the Pakistan Cricket Board do? It overturned the ban on the basis that it could not be satisfied that Shoaib knew the effect of what he was taking. Here was the difference. 2003, a judge in the Supreme Court of Queensland, a friend of mine, he was the head of the reviewing committee that banned Shane Warne for a year on the basis that it's a it's a strict liability offence. If the substance was in your body, you have committed the offence. If you can't explain how it was there, then as it applied in Australia, effect of the rule was, well, you're banned. In Pakistan, the application of the law was different. Why is this interesting? And I don't say one's right and one's wrong, because there's no point in saying pointing the finger when bans have happened or not happened. What we have now in the WADA code, the World Anti-Doping Authority code, is a universal application of the anti-doping rule violation. Therefore, if it is in your body as an athlete, you have committed an anti-doping rule violation offence. There is no way to avoid that fact. What tribunals such as mine do is look at what sanction gets imposed as a consequence. Now, under the code, a first anti-doping rule violation is a 4-year ban in the sport. It can be reduced to 2 for what's called for an early guilty plea, and it can be halved again for what's called substantial compliance. How did I get into all of this? If you mention drugs in sport, the first sport that springs to mind is cycling. Why? Because Lance Armstrong brought it into all of our minds. Now, I acted for a number of cyclists who rode with Lance Armstrong who were drawn into the fallout or the fall from grace of Lance. And this, I think, brings us neatly into the question of what is sports corruption. Sports corruption, I think, can be divided into 2 broad areas. Drugs in sport, which is cheating to win, and on the other side, let's say throwing the game or cheating in the game, not to win, mostly to lose, but to win elsewhere because of betting. So you follow the money either way, and that's where you will find the corruption. You either win and look at the riches, somebody like Lance Armstrong received winning 8 Tour de France's, or you look at what can be made through betting agencies when games are thrown. So why is it that we find ourselves looking at athletes who have fallen into corrupt conduct? I'm going to point the finger at Australia again and say we're not immune from corrupt conduct. There are two glaring examples in cricket. One is Mark Waugh and Shane Warne meeting a bookmaker in the 90s. It was investigated. Nothing came of it. There were some small fines paid for, not because of the meeting, but because of a lack of honesty about the meeting, the initial denial, etc. But they were implemented under the Australian Cricket Board's code at the time. The second is the disastrous decision by Steve Smith and David Warner in South Africa. Now, the Australian Cricket Board responded to that by banning both of them for a year. Think about that. These guys were being paid $3 million plus by the $3 million Australian dollars by the Australian Cricket Board per year. They lost $3 million of income. They lost their bat sponsors. They lost their equipment sponsors. And I happened to sit across from David Warner about 3 months after it had happened, when he was going to play the Caribbean Premier League in the Qantas Lounge in Brisbane, and he and I were just sitting opposite each other having breakfast. And I said to him, I cannot imagine any offence being committed by a criminal which would visit upon them a loss or a fine, a criminal sanction of $6 million. And he was a shattered man sitting there. I also gave him, incidentally, you might appreciate this. I said, what have you been doing in Brisbane? He said, I've been at the National Cricket Centre trying out new cricket gloves. And everybody knows that he's crazy about his cricket gloves. He's always changing them. He's always tweaking them. And I said, oh, right. And how are your new cricket gloves going? And he said, oh, there's a problem with one, a problem with the other. I said to him, listen, mate, when I was playing for the Weekenders in England and I hit 67 not out on the Hertford cricket, the minor counties ground at Hertford in the Hertford Festival of Cricket, I looked down and I realised when I was about 38 not out that I had mismatched gloves. So I think you're a bit too worried about these gloves. And he just looked at me and said, oh my God, I could never have done that. So I suppose in that moment I thought I was a better batsman than David Warner. I'm not sure that's actually true. I think he is a better batsman than me. But the one thing we do share is exactly the same height, 170 centimetres, so perhaps I am the David Warner of barristers. But I segue. So what had occurred to me with Steve Smith and with David Warner is that there's a and I suspect it's the same in India, I suspect it's the same in Bangladesh, I suspect it's the same in Sri Lanka. We take very young, very talented people and they get thrust onto the world stage and they don't have the ability to make the decisions at high speed. They can in cricket, but they can't make the decisions about integrity matters, and they can't determine right from wrong when the chips are down, when the pressure is on. That is what the sandpaper incident was a product of. It's not a product of people who went out there to deliberately cheat. It was a product of a dysfunctional Australian cricket team at the time. They had problems with the coach. They had problems with the way in which the management of the Australian cricket team was being conducted, and they were losing badly in South Africa. David Warner was being abused by the South African fans, and they resorted to something which, in retrospect, you'd say to them, hey, you were just about to lose a test series. Okay, that happens. You don't need to cheat. So the idea that cheating is always a deliberate and pre-planned area of conduct, can I say, or a decision that is pre-planned, predetermined, is wrong. And we as lawyers who sit back and look at the facts are the people who are best equipped to assist the proper analysis of anti-corrupt conduct. Bear in mind, Australian Cricket Board, in their discretion, banned these guys for a year. The ICC recommended a one-match ban because that was consistent with the bans for ball tampering that are imposed across the board. England in 2005 discovered that you could use Murray mint combined with saliva to coat the ball, and they did it relentlessly throughout the 2005 Ashes, and cricket, England said, oh, well, that's not unsportsmanlike conduct because the rules don't say you can't do it. The rules now do say you can't do it. To which they now say, oh, well, we weren't cheating then, but if we did it now, we would be. So there is a spectrum on this idea of cheating. There's a spectrum on this idea of anti-corrupt conduct. And it's very important that independent tribunals, like Mr. Gupta's idea, like the ones we have in Australia, it's very important that these exist so that they can consider the facts as they apply to the situation. It is too easy for the press to criticise the sports people without considering what all the facts might be. Let me say something about drugs. Drugs continue to be a problem in every sport. I think the steps that are being taken by cycling have been brilliant, and I don't hand on heart say that certain people who have won the Tour de France, who are clean at the time they win, have ever not taken drugs. But the biological passport introduced by the UCI and the amount of testing that cyclists are subjected to beggars belief. But when we were talking about FIFA, and I agree, who is FIFA to ban India from and Sri Lanka from participation in world football tournaments? FIFA is the ultimate wolf in charge of its own henhouse, and we know this because every single soccer club that exists from the southern tip of South America to Australia to India to Africa, every time a parent enrolls their child in a soccer club and pays a fee, a little bit of that fee goes to the national body, goes to the state body, the national body, and eventually finds its way to FIFA. When Sepp Blatter was in charge of FIFA, and I know this because I've been to the restaurant twice, at FIFA headquarters, he caused FIFA to buy the restaurant in the headquarters so he had somewhere to eat for lunch every day. And when the view of the Lake of Zurich was going to be interrupted by sale of land, he bought that land through FIFA as well, where there's a vineyard, and in that vineyard is produced the Pinot, which is sold in the FIFA restaurant. Now, you try and tell some parent who struggles to put food on the table, but wants their child in Uganda to play soccer, that some of their money goes to the FIFA restaurant in Zurich. They can't even comprehend the stupidity of that. But the interesting thing that I found about FIFA, which I wanted to share to you today, was this. FIFA, I think, is probably the most powerful sporting body in the world. And FIFA and football players are the highest paid sports people in the world. Therefore, they've got the greatest incentive to stay in the best condition for the money. Now, if you consider that in Australia, for example, our Sudanese heritage 800-metre runner who came fourth in the Olympics was recently revealed in the press as having tested positive to EPO. EPO, we all know, is a red blood cell producer. It oxygenates the blood. Originally, it was a drug produced for cancer sufferers. And EPO naturally gets produced if you go to altitude. So EPO synthetically replicates the effect of training at altitude because it enables your blood to more effectively carry oxygen around your body. So therefore, it's a benefit to endurance athletes. He had a positive EPO A sample, and before his B sample was tested, this was revealed. And people said, aha, you can't come fourth at the Olympics without cheating. Well, his B sample was negative. The thing about EPO is it's a very, very difficult drug to detect, and it requires the exercise of scientific discretion. Whenever you give scientists a discretion, you've got a problem, because a scientist who's looking for something will err on the side of finding it, or otherwise ignoring signals which suggest that they shouldn't conclude that there's the presence of substance, because they're not using pure science, they're using science plus discretion. So if you asked me, from all the work I've done in drugs and sport, if athletics is clean, I say absolutely not. There is a massive incentive for the poorer nations' runners to take drugs, just as there are in Australia, the United States and the United Kingdom and Europe. And we saw that through Russia. Russia was banned not because of athletes testing positive, but Russia was banned because it refused to comply with the directions of WADA by delivering to WADA results of tests on their athletes. And of course it's a waiting game which Russia has won, because the IOC, without ever receiving that level of information, has now said we'll allow Russia to compete again at the Olympics. Now, I've acted for athletes who have said, in particular one world champion who has told me that when he was competing in Russia, where the world record in the walk was set, all of the athletes were directed out one door, the Russians were directed out the other door. The only people who were tested were the non-Russians, and what the Russians left behind were used syringes, because he saw them and he took photographs of them, and he gave them to the he gave them to the Australian Athletics Federation, who did nothing about it, because they said, what are we, who are we to say something to our Russian hosts? So that was the end of that. So drugs continue to exist. The ability to detect drugs is only affected by the presence of drug testers. The smaller and the poorer the nations, the less money is made available for drug testers. You think about this, in the West Indies, there's one drug tester amongst all of those islands. So I'm not saying Usain Bolt took drugs. I'm certainly not saying that, because I have no reason to say it. How does that one drug tester do his job by going amongst all the islands to test all the athletes who are supreme that come out of the West Indies? Well, it's an impossible task. So what does the future look like? The future looks bright when independent tribunals like ours, like the ones Mr. Gupta is thinking about, are set up so that we can properly and independently assist the athletes and the sports to regulate, there's that word again, regulate their sports for the sake of everyone. I've gone a little bit over time. Thank you very much. We'll take some questions when you like.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston, for your insightful speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost at the end of our session. The one takeaway from Mr. Johnston's speech I find is he has emphasized on how the respective tribunals have varied in the decision-making process in taking into account the intention aspect of the sports personalities in respect of the conduct that they are being charged for. So that's an interesting take. Right now we have 5 minutes left for the sessions. If there is any questions that anybody would have from the floor, can I just... Mr. Santhan.
Hello. There was a suggestion about a tribunal being created voluntarily by all of us in this region, Southern Asia. The suggestion came from Aruneshwar and endorsed by our friend Chris. I just wanted to know the opinion of others, including you.
Okay. You want to take that first? You need to switch it on.
As far as Sri Lanka is concerned, I think my colleagues and my brothers would agree. I too endorse that. I think having a special body, such as what has been suggested, I think we'll be able to better manage and resolve issues and identify the concerns of the players as well, because otherwise if this goes to a ordinary tribunal or a court, they will look at it from a different perspective. So the concerns of all stakeholders will not be considered, it will be a more from a criminal aspect of it. So I think that's a very good suggestion, and I think Sri Lanka should also subscribe to that.
Mr. Johnson.
These tribunals, there are models that exist, and the Australian one is functioning very well. As I said, from our perspective, it relies upon either the sport as it exists conferring jurisdiction, or legislation requiring the sports to endorse the tribunal as the decision-making body. One thing I didn't mention, which was another thing Mr. Gupta mentioned, is speed of decisions. So in my tribunal, we are required to give a decision in 24 hours and reasons in 3 days. When we're dealing with decisions against non-selection, especially in amateur sports, where these people are only competing for the love, they can never make any money, it is vital that we make a decision quickly. I have in mind one I did just before I came here for an appeal against non-selection for the World Triathlon Cup event that was happening somewhere in Europe. You know, I've done appeals by squash players from non-selection in Commonwealth Games teams, because they can't, it is the pinnacle of their lives. So it's very important that you develop a corporate body that has the expertise and the independence and can consider and can apply its expertise across all sports.
Mr. De Silva, please.
I think another most important aspect of this tribunal should be to try and educate the sportsmen. I think most of the, we put it up on the screen, I think not realizing that these are all children who are just out of school sometimes who participate have to be educated, because that's probably one reason why we see that at a very young age they commit most of these crimes. So I guess having that part of area covered is very, very important.
We have amongst ourselves a very distinguished judge from Pakistan, Justice Asad Munir. He's the retired judge from the Supreme Court. I would like to request to come over and just share with us his thoughts on this issue of a regional tribunal for sports. Sir.
Good morning. I think the ideas which were mooted here are applicable, and I'm afraid we don't have the tribunals which have been talked about. So I think that people in authority can introduce them in Pakistan, because the problems are the same. You know, the drug, whether it is drug problem or the selection problem or other corruption matters, they are all the same. So the need to set them up cannot be overemphasized. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As regards our take from Bangladesh, I have had one experience where we had to go to the Court of Arbitration for Sports, where just to get an award where sanction was agreed upon by both the governing body and the individual player in concern. So just to overturn a tribunal's decision. So maybe a regional cricket tribunal or regional sports tribunal in Southeast Asia would definitely help us in terms of infrastructure, expertise, financial aspects, and maybe even the sports personnel who are individual players. They'll find a bit more comfort within the regional aspect as opposed to going out of the region before any other tribunal. So definitely this is a good food for thought and maybe something that could be considered for the future. We have another guest with a question.
Good morning. My name is Senaka Veeraratna. I'm an attorney at law, and I'm also very interested in cricket because I have a special claim to be the pioneer of the what is now known as a DRS, decision review system. But I'm an aggrieved person. I got all the evidence to support my claim for recognition, but I'm not getting the recognition. So unlike the people that I just mentioned, as for non-selection, for various other grievances, I have a very special grievance. That is my intellectual property rights. Economic copyright, moral copyright has been violated, and I am too small a person to fight a big organization which controls cricket to get justice. So if we have, I'm making a plea. I'm using this opportunity to making a plea to the various cricket affiliated bodies that have come here to look into my side, but I'm too weak to fight for justice in respect to my my claims. So I live with that. So if you're having a sports tribunal to look after the interests of sports-related persons in, say, South Asia, I'll be very happy to be supportive because I myself consider myself as a victim. I call for your support to ensure that not only me, that entire South Asia is given recognition for what I have contributed to the game of cricket. Thank you.
Thank you. At the very beginning of the session, I just had one query for Mr. Zoisa regarding the role of the policing power in terms of investigation being conducted for offences under the code. And the other question was in relation to whether your legislation has a scope for entertaining those exception to the match fixing that a usual anti-corruption code contains. Thank you.
Thank you. I think as far as our law is concerned, since it is statutory now, it appears that we have gone one step ahead of the ICC Code of Conduct. And I don't think that the law in Sri Lanka, there is an exemption to that, what is contemplated in the ICC Code of Anti-Corruption Code.
Okay.
So that's, if you look at the act in its totality, I think it has far-reaching repercussions, because anything can be interpreted to be, I mean, you would agree with me also, just a cursory glance, to be coming within the interpretation of being corrupt activity. So that's a dangerous trend. So ICC has certain relaxations, but not the Sri Lankan law. Looks like it's too rigid, I think, in my opinion.
Thank you. One more question, please.
Hello. This question is to Mr. Christopher Johnstone. My question to you. Now, going by what's been happening for last 1.5 hours, we found that there are huge importance being given for the formulation of the sports tribunal. And you said it was introduced or formulated in 2019 in Australia. Though it's been 4 years, it may not be quite a long time. How do you think, or how successful do you think this has been in Australia?
That's interesting. We were looking at the statistics just recently. Because it requires conferral of jurisdiction, it has taken time. But the federal government, I can give you the exact statistics, but if you just excuse me while I open, because I did prepare this in case this question came up. Sorry. So the tribunal has now dealt with, just in last year, it's dealt with 49 cases. One of them was doping, and most of them were either integrity or appeals against non-selection. That doesn't sound like a lot, but the previous year it was 20. So it's already doubled, and prior to that it was 18. Obviously, the work of the tribunal changes for Olympic and Commonwealth Games years, and if cricket and AFL and and NRL, Rugby League, gives all or any part of their jurisdictions to the tribunal, then its work will explode. The first one who's likely to do it is cricket, and that's probably because cricket is prepared to be the most transparent in Australia. Obviously, the relationship between professional athletes and their clubs or their sports governing bodies are contractual, so the alterations to contracts becomes, which are long-standing or which go for a couple of years. That will be the problem. In cricket, the contracts are renewed each year, and they're just renewed at one point in time. And in Australia, just like in India, you have a player rating, and that determines how much they're paid. So I can see the future with Cricket Australia giving that jurisdiction to the tribunal, and then that would only require BBL to give its, the Big Bash League to give its jurisdiction as well, and suddenly the tribunal will control a very large part of Australian sport.
Thank you. Is there any other question from the floor? Yes, one. We would like to thank Mr. Zoyser to be here amongst us and for sharing his thoughts. Unfortunately, he has to leave because of his court commitments. And so can we please give him a round of applause for his insightful thoughts. Thank you. Go ahead. Our chief guest also, Mr. De Silva has to go as well. So we would like to bring this session to a close. We once again thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being amongst us. And thank you once again with a round of applause to everyone who has participated in this session. Thank you.